So here we are just 10 or 11 days before the opener against Utah State. I believe Iowa's a 23.5 point favorite, if I remember the line that I last saw. And I guess we should be talking football. If, in fact, there is football to talk about, is there anything out of camp? Is there anything that has grabbed your eye outside of a transfer note that we want to hit on? But besides that,
Yeah, I mean that's the one, and that'll be. I haven't published a video on that yet. I'll get one out here this evening. Marshall Meeder, kicker, transfer from Central Michigan. Iowa landed him. Very late addition. They needed him. I mean, Aaron Blom right now is facing a lengthy suspension. There's no official word on that yet. Which, by the way, Mark, here we are again on a Tuesday afternoon with still no news from the NCAA. I think it's disgraceful. I think it's ridiculous, the fact that we cannot get clarity and that these players and coaches cannot get clarity as to who's going to be available week one. It's just pathetic. I don't know. I mean, now I'm starting to think maybe we won't get news, and these guys are just going to have to sit out for fear that they are ineligible. It's just ridiculous. They've had since May to figure all this out. Anyways, they got Marshall Meeder out of the portal. He entered the portal back in the spring. Not sure why he took so long to find a home. He was really good his freshman year. If you go back and look up at his stats, I believe he was perfect his freshman year in 2020. And I don't want to say digressed, had a rough 2021 or 2022 from a stats perspective. I think he was 5 of 11 from field goal range. But the kid's made some tough kicks, a lot of kicks over 50 yards. And he's what they needed. I mean, like, to be able to find someone like this late in the process, when they're likely down their second kicker, and Alec Wick is a guy who people have talked about. You know, he kicked in high school. It's been reported. I asked LeVar Woods on Media Day, hey, is there anybody else practicing behind Drew Stevens? He basically told me, no, I don't know. I'm not questioning LeVar Woods' honesty, but I don't know that that's the case now. It sounds like Alec Wick had been working some behind him. And remember, Alec Wick is a walk-on receiver from the Iowa City area, but he's been reportedly dealing with some injuries this fall. So they needed somebody behind Drew Stevens. And a person may say, well, you know, normally a punter can kick. Well, they've got Torrey Taylor, who's an Australian punter. That's the one thing about having an Australian punter. I'm guessing he's not real comfortable with place kicking. I don't think he probably has any background in place kicking. So they needed somebody. The fact they were able to get Meeder this late in the process is huge. And it sounds like, according to, I have not talked to Marshall, but I did see a report. Blair Sanderson did report of HawkeyeReport.com. He reported that Meeder is coming here as a walk-on. That's just, again, huge. I had heard this a couple of days ago from someone, and you know, it's one of those things you don't really want to report on until it becomes official. I know Meeder posted on his bio that he's a part of Hawkeye football, so I guess that means it's official. So I don't know how this works. Maybe you can tell me, Mark, this late in the process, is it just a matter of getting him to camp ASAP? I'm assuming he's eligible right away. I don't know the last time Iowa added somebody this late in the process. I don't know that they have since the era of the portal.
yeah, I think he just needs to be enrolled in classes before you can hit the field and practice with the team. But besides that, I've not looked into this particular transfer. I didn't know anything about it until you mentioned it right before we came on. But this is extremely late in the process. Yeah. And like you say, it's awful of the NCAA to sit on a ruling for over 3 months when that ruling impacts these student athletes. And you know, the reason they have a scholarship is to play for that particular athletic season, for this football season, and for them not to get to that and to be able to review the process, make a ruling. But they also had a similar situation in a way in terms of eligibility with 17 players, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, where it took them that long. And we're talking about players that transferred a long time ago, right after the 22 season, and they're just now denying them eligibility. And most of them claimed a hardship, like a medical situation in the family, and they were denied sometime in early August. Well, that's ridiculous.
I don't understand any of that. This almost screams Drew Ott in that situation. You probably don't remember that, Mark, but his
I remember
situation
Drew Ott.
where he was hurt, and I'd have to go back and refresh my mind on the details of what happened there. But his NCAA petition for extra eligibility was denied. His career was basically, I hate to say this, but you could argue that his career was ruined by the NCAA. Dealt with an injury, waited around, held out hope for extra eligibility. The NCAA denied him. He was an NFL prospect, Mark. That dude was like, I'll go back to 2015, like start of 15. I was in the stadium. I think it was Iowa, Miami, Ohio, week 1. And I get it. It's a MAC school. I don't know that I've seen a D end as dominant as Drew Ott was in that game. And, he ended up becoming a farmer, which is fine. Good for him. As Hayden Fry would say, we need farmers. But it was just sad. And I just hope I've been very outspoken about if these kids gambled, and obviously they did, then they deserve some consequences because the rules were in place, whether you agree with the rules or not. Okay. Whether they bet on their own teams or not, the rules were in place. I believe that if you violate a rule, even if the rule is absurd and not fair, you violated the rule that you knew to be in place. You deserve discipline. But at some point, this gets ridiculous. Like you said, the fact that we've been waiting around since May. Kirk Ferentz made a point of saying the other day that Noah Shannon did not break the law. So Aaron Blum and Jack Johnson, those guys are accused of actually breaking the law. And so there's going to be harsher punishments for them. Same thing with Iowa State quarterback Hunter Deckers, who's no longer with the team. I was told several weeks ago that Aaron Blum was stepping away from the program. And I did see that Jairell Brock, Iowa State's running back, has left the program as well. But again, these other guys like Noah Shannon, and there is another name or two noteworthy people on the Iowa depth chart roster that I have not named and I don't think have officially been named, but are people that I've heard are under investigation. It's just going to really stink. And especially if we don't get an answer by week 2, they ought to get an answer now. They ought to have an answer prior to game week. They should have had an answer a month ago, probably 2 months ago. But I just, you hate to think that they could be down a starter, 2, 3 starters, either one of these teams. Iowa State doesn't deserve it either. If they broke the law and they deserve to be suspended, then suspend them. But don't leave them wondering what's going to happen and make them make a decision and think, well, if Matt Campbell's in a situation where he says, well, if I play this D lineman and we win, we may end up having to forfeit the game later. That's not fair. So I just hope the NCAA can do something right here and make good on their obligation to give these kids a fair shake.
Yeah, it's not been a good couple of months for the NCAA because we have a situation with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan in which during Big Ten Media Days just prior to, it was reported that there would be a 4-game suspension. And then the suspension was rescinded. And now we're understanding that suspension didn't clear the infractions committee, did not satisfy the infractions committee. However, they are still investigating. Now Michigan has taken the steps to self-impose a 3-game suspension to see whether that appeases the infractions committee, but the infractions committee has yet to rule. Although there was reported the day before Big Ten Media Days that he was going to be suspended for 4 days.
And by the way, OS for Hawks in the chat, I agree with you. At the end of the day, you need to be accountable for decisions you make, period. But that's the problem. These kids are not being held accountable. They're being held in limbo. So it's like, your child violates some house rule that you have, and you tell them, well, I'm going to discipline you, but I'm going to wait several months to make sure I have all the facts. Like, that's unreasonable to think. And at this point, these kids have been held out, again, not saying I know exactly how much Noah Shannon bet and these other guys, but these guys have been held out of team activities. They've already suffered as a result of what they did. And perhaps they deserve to miss games. That's very possible, but just give them the punishment already, give them the discipline, and we can maybe move on from this. And as Kirk Ferentz has talked about, there probably needs to be a look at the NCAA legislation behind these rules in the first place. That's a discussion for another day. That discussion needs to be expedited by the powers that be. But in the interim, we've got to get answers to the student athletes involved. Remember, Iowa and Iowa State play week 2. So these are two programs that are at the forefront of the betting news nationally in college football. They play week 2. It would be such a shame if we don't get an answer by week 2, and all because of that, both of these, it just wouldn't, it's just unfortunate all the way around. By the way, I'll just add one more thing about Iowa State. Iowa State, we mentioned Gerald Brock. Obviously, Hunter Deckers is not with the team. They have suffered immensely, more than Iowa has, as it relates to already seen attrition due to the betting stuff. But it does sound, I mean, from what I've gathered, there is a positive vibe with the group they have. It sounds like that they feel more comfortable with depth across the board that they did a year ago. I found myself about a week ago saying Iowa should rout Iowa State. That's my thought. Like they deal with all this attrition. They were 4-8 last year. Iowa personnel wise is so much better. And yet I just recall times in the past when I've said that, and this ends up being a really close game. And after I heard what I heard here a few days ago, that maybe they're looking a little bit better in practice, a little bit deeper in practice than I would have guessed due to the attrition. I just, I urge fans to be cautiously optimistic about that matchup because that rivalry is so unpredictable. That's going to be a big, big game. They need to be 3-0 heading into the Penn State game. We've talked about that because if they're not, that spells trouble, but it's a dangerous, dangerous game.